Daoud Sultanzoy, he's the former mayor of Kabul. Thank you very much indeed for being with us. And I just wanted to ask you, what do you make of this week's huge news that the Al-Qaeda #1 was killed in your city?
I think it was to be expected because the season was ripe for it domestically in the United States. The United States had its intelligence, of course, and they had to do something about it. Politically also, they couldn't have waited because midterm elections are ahead of them, and they had to either take action or lose the target. On the other hand, the pundits, of course, think that the U.S. knew this long time ago, and they waited until this time. But in any case, it was to be expected. The U.S. had to show some muscle. It's like bodybuilding. Bodybuilders pump iron to show their muscle. The United States, Russia, China, and some of these countries, they occasionally show their muscle. And they, of course, have reasons or not. That's a different subject for debate. But you can see that the Russians did it in Ukraine. The Chinese, soon after this operation, showed their muscle in the neighborhood of Taiwan. So these are to be expected.
Well, the Americans have said that the fact Al-Qaeda was operating in Afghanistan is a violation of the Doha Accords. Was the group operating when you were there?
You see, groups, organizations like Al-Qaeda, they always find an environment of sympathizers in that region. And in those sympathizers, they locate their sleeper cells. So I wouldn't doubt that Al-Qaeda was in Afghanistan, not in an active fashion at that time when we were there. But of course, they had sleeper cells, and ideologically oriented sympathizers are very, very convenient cells for these kinds of organizations.
Now, he was killed in a house in downtown Kabul. He was sitting on the balcony, apparently. It's hard to believe, isn't it, that the Taliban didn't know he was there. Do you think that they decided to hand him over to the Americans?
This should create a new question in the media. Who brought him to the balcony? That was something that is, unfortunately, a question that I don't think we will find the answer very soon. But pundits and Monday morning quarterbacks talk about this. They use three scenarios. There are three narratives. One is that the U.S. had its own independent intelligence, and they acted upon making sure that that intelligence is accurate, and they did what they did. The second was that they had a group of sympathizers, moderate sympathizers in the Taliban who cooperated with the U.S. and helped them with the intelligence. The third is that the U.S. made a deal with whoever got paid the ransom money, and they just gave up the target. So we have to remember that there was tens of millions of dollars of ransom on the head of this guy. So these three narratives are being talked about in the circles.
And of course, the Americans also signed the Doha agreements, and the Taliban claim that the US has violated them by carrying out an airstrike on Afghan territory.
Well, this is a very interesting subject. You know, it's a blame game. But the US also can ask, what was he doing in Kabul? This guy was the head of Al-Qaeda after Osama. The Taliban probably have to find an answer for that. How did he get there? Did they know about it? If they didn't, how did he get there then? If they did, why didn't they tell the U.S.? So these are questions that eventually one day it will pop out, but I'm sure the U.S. knows the answers for it.
And if I could just ask you a bit about your own personal experience, how is life in exile? You had to flee the country like so many other Afghans when the Taliban took over.
Well, I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. This is not a choice. But right now, most of the people like me are sort of limbo. This is the third time we have left our country. One was when the Soviets invaded, and then the second time when there was internal war among different groups of Mujahideen, and now this is the third time. So it is very, very unwelcome experience, and I don't want to wish it on anyone.
And of course, the Afghan people are suffering terribly under the Taliban oppression. Are you able to do anything to help people back home?
See, it's a very interesting question because when the U.S. left the way they did, they left Afghanistan the way they did, a nation that was already suffering from poverty and fatigue of war, that poverty has increased. On top of it, the very, very draconian measures that the Taliban are taking vis-a-vis women in education and social activities, media freedom, social freedoms. Many of these things are things that not just Afghans, but every human being who had supported the international community's presence in Afghanistan, they helped that presence, the international community's presence with their tax money. They should all ask these questions. For some reason, many are silent. And of course, the leader of the Taliban naturally announced the other day that no other law is acceptable in Afghanistan. No man-made law is acceptable. So in 21st century, these are questions that need to be pondered upon and acted upon and find answers. We are responsible to a nation of 40 million that 20 years of international community's presence provided opportunities for them to feel like human beings, and then all of a sudden the rug is pulled underneath all of them. These are not acceptable situations that should be imposed on anybody.
Well, what is the way forward then, Mayor Sultanzoy? Should the international community engage with the Taliban, or should they not engage with them at all? Should they isolate them?
You know, the engagement has been experienced for since the Doha activities started more than a decade ago, even longer. So engagement has to have some good teeth. Engagement has to have some tangible results. Engagement has to have a reciprocity of responsibilities, and engagement has to have some tangible outcome on the ground in Afghanistan for the people of that country.